So we could do this, and that is sending things backwards in props, right? So we were able to take a property and do something with the data in those properties, right? Those props. We can display it like we did here. Now, how about a callback so we can send it back to what declared the prop in the first place? So that is in our list. Like, what if I actually had something in here that I wanted to run when it was declared? Much like this onClick method. What if I wanted my own sort of thing like onClick? OnClick, of course, is built in, but inside of this post detail, I can actually create a handler for this. So let's go ahead and make a new method, and we'll just say handle data callback. That's what I'm going to just call it. This is a random name. Of course, you would probably have it a little bit more explicit to what you're trying to build, really. But let's just call it handle data callback, and we'll go ahead and console log this. Again, I'm consoling log this to make sure that this works as well. We saw that in the last one where if I didn't do this constructor, things didn't necessarily work the way I wanted them to. Okay, so with this callback method, I'm going to come back in here and add a prop called data callback. And this prop will handle it. So this dot data callback method, right? So let's go ahead and just enter these out so we can read this a little bit better. Okay, so this data callback, I named that prop myself. It's just something that's completely made up, and we now have a way to handle it. So hopefully this actually works. Hopefully it works just like this. So that means that inside of my post detail, I want to actually call this prop. I want to actually trigger that callback to actually happen. So how does that happen? Well, back in the props, let's just say we do it when the title was clicked. We're going to send back something there. You could send back a JSON object. You can send back a string. You can send back a Boolean value. There's a lot of data types you could actually send back. But the main thing here is actually making sure that it works. So what I want to do is I want to grab the property that's related to this. So I'll just go ahead and say constant. And it's going to be the property is the name data callback, right? So data callback is the props method itself. So we can do this.props. And yet again, I can use these curly brackets like I've seen before. And in fact, I can actually call this now. So I can call this method and say hello world. And since I'm going to call it, since I'm actually passing something in there, back in my handler, I'm going to go ahead and say the text MSG. And I'll just go ahead and alert that text MSG. Of course, this is, again, an arbitrary argument here, but I'm just writing some random stuff to see how that callback works. So data callback, it's going off of this property, and it's going to run it. Okay, so we save it. Let's go back into our project, click on the title. Hello world. Seems to be working. Pretty cool. Now, what happens if I get rid of that callback handler? Like if I cut this out like that. See, it's still trying to do that callback, but there's nothing to handle it. So it's not even on a property. So let's go back into our code and click on it. It gives me this error. Data callback is not a function, right? So let's go back into our detail, uncomment this out, and let's just go ahead and console log what this is. Let's console log what that property actually is. So we save that, click on setup React, it says undefined. Here's an opportunity to do a condition. We'll just say if data callback is not equal to undefined, then we will actually do the callback. Just like that. Going back on my post list, I'm going to just do undo a couple times to make sure that callback is there, still there, but I'm going to save it just for a moment. We save it. And again, we'll click on that button, still saying undefined, but no errors happening, even though the callback is there. Now let's bring that callback back in, save that, and now run it. And what do you know? It says hello world. Okay, great. But we're still not done. This handle callback, it's not exactly calling back console log this. So on the safe side, we bring in that constructor, just like we did before. So constructor props super props. And again, this dot handle data callback equals to this dot handle data callback dot bind this. This is something you want to get in the habit of doing, especially when you have a method that's being called inside of your render. If it's not being called inside of your render, there's a good chance you won't need to do this, right? But if it is being called inside of render, that's when you're going to want to do it. And that's the reason we did that on-click event in general, is so you can figure out how to actually handle data that's coming through. So I'm going to comment these things out because I actually won't end up using those per se. You might, but I won't. So I will leave the code in there if you want it for reference. But the main thing here is figuring out how to send things back. Now, I do recommend that you try it out. Try to actually send something, some other kind of detail back, or more than just one thing. Perhaps that's something else that you might consider trying out and seeing how that works. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to get everything. We're going to be doing a lot